Welcome, Neil. Thanks for taking a bit of time out of, I'm sure, is a very busy day to have a cozy chat with me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
So, if we could just start off, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started the company.
Sure. Well, Fresh Air is a dedicated podcast company for brands. My background is I was an individual producer for a long time, audio producer. Just fell in love with radio at the age of about 19 and built from there, really. I wanted to be a presenter for a long time, sort of got that on my system, did a commercial radio breakfast show for a few years. But my love of audio and radio has never really changed. And so for many years, I was an individual freelancer working for the BBC and other broadcasters, making programs, making trailers, working for Radio 5 Live and elsewhere. And then podcasting came along, really, 2014 was the big breakthrough for podcasting. And it built from there as a business opportunity. We spent a while sort of playing with the idea of making celebrity podcasts or original podcasts or storytelling shows. And actually what I saw was an opportunity to work with brands and help brands tell their own stories. Our first commercial client was the National Trust. And there's an organization that just has stories coming out of its ears in terms of the properties that it owns, the people it's been associated with, the people who've donated their properties over the years. And audio is a brilliant storytelling medium. It's a place where you can really indulge in a topic and learn lots and get really in depth. And so a company like the National Trust, it seemed like an opportunity that they were really missing to create audio shows. So we went in and sold it to them and helped them get into podcasting. Actually, it was slightly backfired because they were so successful that they set up their own in-house podcast department and didn't need us anymore, which is just a bit frustrating. But we learned from that and then ended up basically trying to build a real niche for ourselves in working for organizations that wanted to tell their own stories in podcasting. And so that's got to a point now where we have about 40 or so different corporate clients, from NGOs to charities to large global financial organizations, government departments, anyone who's, really wants to tell their story in audio. And I have sort of moved from being an individual producer through to running this business, which is now about 10 people in-house and then a wider group of up to 30 freelancers working for, as I say, 40 or so brands. We made over 480 podcast episodes in 2024, and continue to try and innovate and build the understanding of how businesses use podcasts to tell their story, which is, I guess, exactly what you're doing today.
No, brilliant. No, I'm impressed. As I said, two things I love. I'm obsessed with talk radio, so I'm a bit of a talk
Right.
radio fan. Radio 5 Live is my favorite sort of go-to, a bit of Radio 4. I think now I've got older, I'm listening to a bit more Radio 4, but
Yeah. That's exactly how it works, isn't it? You start off with Radio 1 and you slowly progress to Radio 4 as you get older. Yeah.
so I'm showing the signs of it now, but you want more serious stuff, let's get some
Yeah,
serious
yeah, yeah.
people on, stop messing around.
Well, it is the beauty of again, going back even to, podcasting only existed from 2004 onwards, and so my love of radio always came from exactly that, from the fact that you can have in-depth conversations. You can, audio can take you to places that it's very difficult for video to, and you can indulge in topics that you might not otherwise indulge in or spend half an hour listening to. And podcasting is really an extension of that speech radio. It allows more and more people to tell long form stories and for listeners to get more and more involved in long-term storytelling. And you used to be very loyal to Radio 2, Radio 4. People used to identify themselves as a Radio 4 listener. Increasingly, podcasting is playing that role too. That you may say, "Oh, I'm a massive history geek, and therefore I listen to The Rest Is History all the time." And it's sort of it's expanding the role, even that it's, radio is not dead, but podcasting is now bringing audio as a medium to more and more people who are getting to love it.
Absolutely. And it's so fantastic because whilst everybody says video is the thing, but actually there's times when it's not that practical. For example, when I'm here working, I don't want to watch a video. I want to listen to I want to listen to audio. If I'm in the car, it's again, I want audio. If I'm in the gym, a video doesn't work. I want to hear audio. So there's lots of times when audio is more appropriate because you can actually listen when I'm washing the dishes or doing tasks around the house. I can listen to audio more effectively than a video.
Yeah, and you listen for longer than you would a video as well, because, as you say, if you go out on a run or you're on a car journey, that might be half an hour or 40 minutes of time that you're dedicated to one piece of content. You wouldn't sit and watch a YouTube video, or very few people sit and watch a YouTube video for half an hour. And as you say, definitely not when they're at work or washing the dishes. So, yeah, it's really building a place in people's lives in a way that it hadn't before, and helping businesses to create something that gets into that routine. Nobody wants to listen to a long advert. So we're always trying to encourage clients not to create something that's just about them. But if you as a client, as a business, can create something that is both brilliant to listen to and that people actively want to listen to, choose to listen to, but also tells your own story and gets your own message across and sort of, makes that audience identify more closely with you as a business, then that's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say makes the difference between you and the competition?
The singular focus has been the main thing in the last 5 or so years. So in the podcasting world, there are lots of people making celebrity chat shows. There are lots of people making true crime shows. There are lots of people still making radio programs for the BBC and other broadcasters. Our distinguishing feature has been that we have had an absolute laser focus on working for brands and understanding everything I just talked about how brands effectively use podcasting as a medium. And I've regarded everything else as a distraction, really, over the last 5 years, because it's very sexy to go and make a celebrity podcast. And we have made shows for the BBC, and we have made the odd original series. But my opinion has always been, if you're going to try and own a niche and you're going to try and set yourselves up with a USP in what is a very crowded marketplace, then you really need to know what you are and what you're all about, and not be distracted by other things that could take you sideways from that. So yeah, the singular focus on working for brands and being the experts in that specific niche of the podcast world is what we focused on. It's a double-edged sword because it also means that you are vulnerable, I think, to the ups and downs in that particular market. And so I think at times I have thought that perhaps we should have a more diversified, portfolio of types of work. But actually, the more I've carried on and the more we've grown as a business, I still think that having a niche focus, whatever that is really key, because it allows you to tell your own story as a business and to understand your own expertise rather than try and be a jack of all trades.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In terms of, you must have had obviously so many experiences over the long time you've been running the business. What would you say is your biggest learnings from maybe mistakes you've made or just lessons you've learned on the way?
Well, Fresh Air really evolved out of being me. I spent nearly 20 years being an individual freelancer, as I say. So a sole trader, essentially, for all that time. And I never intended necessarily to build a business of this size. And, it was still a small business, but it's a lot more people and a lot more complex than it was as a sole trader. So I sort of fell into it because there was an opportunity and because podcasting was a medium that was expanding very quickly and we needed to take advantage of it. I know that if I had started from scratch with a little more understanding of what I was getting into, then I probably would have built more infrastructure around me in terms of advice, in terms of support, And when it's been hard, that's when I've realized that my own limitations. And I think the temptation when you are a small business and you see an opportunity to expand, the temptation is to still be quite precious about all the admin side of the business and the financial side. And, whilst it's going well, you're kind of saying, wow, this is just amazing. I'm able to do all of this stuff myself. And, I own all the business and everything's coming my way. And it's still this sort of precious thing that's all mine. But I certainly now, if I was to rewind 6 or 7 years, would build more support around myself and be, I think, more frank about and honest with myself about what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, and allowing other people to do the things that I'm not good at rather than keeping it to myself. So that's the sort of we're basically 5 years into this business really now, and it's probably taken me that time to realize that I shouldn't be doing all the minutiae of the things that I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, we often call it Superman syndrome, having, wanting to do everything yourself. It's my business, it's mine. I can't let go. I want to do everything. I want to see the clients. I want to do everything. Nobody does it as good as me. And as you said, it can be really difficult. And in the end, you can burn yourself out as well.
Yeah, and I think exactly, and I think it's a real revelation. And I've employed some absolutely brilliant people, and I'm incredibly grateful to those who have come to work for me. The people who've left full-time jobs with large employers to come and work with me and have taken their own risk on that front. And it's a revelation when you see them, when you do let go, and you see them do the thing that you used to do and do it 10 times better, and you just go, well, bloody hell, why didn't I let them do that 2 years ago? Because they're great. And sort of, as I say, admitting your own limitations, but also you can then be proud of the fact that you have brought somebody else in who's superb at that thing and elevates the business as a whole. And as long as you can be honest with yourself that they're better than you at it, as ever, never try and be the smartest person in the room. Employ people who are smarter than you to do the things that you're no good at.
Yeah, well, Richard Branson talks about that all the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Accepting that other people could be better, and that's fine. Your role is slightly different, So,
Absolutely.
Having said that, what would be is there a typical day in the life of the founder?
Not really for me. I mean, I tend to work a 12-hour day, not out of design particularly, but I sort of tend to work 7:30 to 7:30. We're a hybrid business, so I spend probably 3 days a week sat on my own in a room, and then a couple of days a week in the London office with the team. And for me, that's a really good balance, because the periods that I'm on my own, I'm very productive, and I have to-do lists that I try and work through. But then when I'm with the rest of the team in the office, that's a different type of day. And I have to tell myself that I'm not being less productive when I'm in the office. Is just being productive in a different way. And, you're building relationships, you're having conversations that you wouldn't have remotely. And you're having fun. You're having more fun than you would on your own. And if you're not having fun in the business, then what's the point? So, yeah, I'm not a kind of get up at 5 a.m. and do 1,000 press-ups before everybody else in the house is awake type of guy. And I'm lucky to have a brilliant family and brilliant kids, so I try and prioritize that. But I do. I've always had an office that is not in my house, so it's only a mile away from my house, but it allows me to separate work and home, and feel like I'm going out of the door and going to work, and then coming in and leaving that behind. And kids are an amazing grounding when you've had a crap day and you walk through the door, they don't care that you've had a crap day. And I try not to let them know that I've had a crap day because, you know, they make it better. So, you know, having that door that is genuinely the barrier between home and work is really important to me. 2018 and 14. So, it's sort of in a nice way, but I'm sure they listen to me and then often go in the next room and laugh about it or ignore it and shrug their shoulders and, you know, raise their eyebrows.
Yeah, it's always nice being a father when you used to say, "Should we go down the park?" And they say, "Oh yeah, let's go down the park, Dad." And then you get to an age where you go, "Should we go down the park?" And they give you that look. Why do I want to
Yeah.
go with you?
Yes. There's a joyful moment when they become as much friends as they are kids. I think that's one of the things that I've really noticed with. I've got a 20-year-old son and an 18-year-old girl, and both of them have. And I can't identify the age that it happens, but there's a moment where, you know, you can regard them as friends and talk to them in a way that is very different from being kids. And, you know, you still have a, you know, paternal relationship with them, but, you know, my son is my best mate, and that's, you know, a joyful thing to have.
Yeah, a bit of banter around the football and that. We have a lot of fun
Yeah.
around certain topics. Some topics I'm a bit more dad, but around
Yeah,
football and
exactly.
sport, we're much more, as you said, pals and friends, and it's fun.
Yeah, my son and I go to watch Swindon Town together, which I wouldn't recommend anybody as an activity, but for us, it's special.
Yeah, well, that's what matters, isn't it?
Mm.
So, do you have anyone when we think of success or role models or whatever? Does anybody come to mind from your point of view?
I tend to not think of people, you know, I'm not a sort of, I don't go around quoting Stephen Bartlett on a daily basis. And I tend to, I think because I've never intended to be a sort of captain of industry or, you know, own a multinational company. I don't really see that kind of figurehead, you know, the sort of, you know, Elon Musk, etc., as an inspiration. I'm inspired by people who are frankly sort of in the same industry as me and have achieved things that I want to achieve. So there's a guy called Steve Pratt in Canada who started a company called Pacific Content, and Fresh Air was very much modeled on Pacific, and Steve had the same sort of ethos that Fresh Air has of treating people well. And, you know, sorry, I'm going to start that again because I just hit the microphone. Steve has the same sort of ethos as Fresh Air in treating people well, but being really serious about what he does and trying to sort of build a business as well as an industry of and a way of working and a way of talking about audio and podcasts. So he's very much, he's been a bit of a mentor to me over the years as well, but he's very much a success story in the industry. There's also a guy called Steve Dunlop who I worked with 10 or so years ago, who started a business called A Million Ads, which is a sort of early AI, audio AI really, about creating adverts that can change according to who's listening to them. You know, if you listen to a radio station in Bristol on a rainy Tuesday, it will give you a different ad to if you're listening in Newcastle on a sunny Wednesday. And Steve started his business at the same sort of time that I started Fresh Air, really, and has just built an extraordinary culture and extraordinary business, both here and in the US. So I tend to look to those types of people as inspiration. I also find that I've known a lot of successful rich people who I wouldn't necessarily count as a success. You know, I think that I've met and spent time with a lot of successful people, in one sense, but also who have a lonely, miserable home life, and I don't I don't aspire to that in any sense. And so, finding people who you are inspired by and who you regard as a success in the broadest sense, I think, is really important.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Then, And it is interesting because as you know, we were talking off air where we were talking about role modeling and how some people seem so far away from somebody's reality they
Mm.
can't relate to them. Somebody with a private jet and I don't know has 10 houses and that all that sort of thing can't always relate to the ordinary business person with 10 staff.
No,
It's just so far away from their reality that it doesn't necessarily relate to them at all.
no, exactly. And I also think if you have role models who you know or who are at least accessible to you, then you can genuinely reach out for advice, or you can take inspiration from them on a genuine level. I think there's been a real push towards people setting themselves up as role models, and you know creating careers out of just throwing sort of facile Instagram statements around, about seize the day. And I don't find any of that inspiring. What I find inspiring is people who've been through the same struggles, and it's bloody hard sometimes. And running a business of any size is tough. But I think running and trying to scale a small business especially in the last 5 years with COVID and everything else, and through the economy that we're currently in, is not all rosy and is really hard. And I would much rather have role models who I can go for a pint with and or have a call with, than somebody who I will never meet, and who is far richer than I will ever be. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, fair enough. So, in terms of your company, then as you said, the last 5 years has been interesting. Is a euphemism I can use. And where do you see the next five?
It's really difficult to know. I think we're in a very, very, and I'm sure every industry says this, but we are in a very, very fast moving medium and a fast moving industry. I say in 2019, it was me on my own. COVID was very good for us, to say it quietly, but COVID was a good period for podcasting, because it coincided with the growth of the medium, and also video was very difficult and podcasting was very easy during COVID. So we had a lot of growth then. We've have a bit of a post-COVID hangover, I think, in the industry. And again, that's true of so many industries. So I think there is where I want Fresh Air to go in the next 5 years is to continue to be a leader in the medium that we're in. There's a temptation to go very big in video, which I think is another potential. We have to treat it carefully. Podcasting as a medium is becoming more visual, and people are expecting to see visuals a lot. And again, I've mentioned his name already, but someone like Stephen Bartlett, Jake Humphrey, these people are creating very high quality video and calling them podcasts. So we have to go where the market is, and people are expecting to see video as part of the podcasting package. But I still believe in the purity of audio. So where I want the business to go in the next 5 years is I want it to adapt to whatever the right model is. I want Fresh Air to be innovating in terms of the business model around podcasting. I think it's not yet fully mature, and therefore we're spending a lot of time sort of theorizing and talking to partners and exploring about what future models there are for funding podcasts and audio shows. And I think that's important to me. It's really important to me that as a business, you don't just say, this is how this industry works, and we're just going to keep growing within that same model. But you continue to look for new models that open up opportunities that you haven't thought of yet. And that's a driver for me. Is we could just carry on doing the same thing that we're doing, which is not a good tactic for any business, because you grow or you die to an extent. But more than that, it's about not accepting that this is the only way of doing it, but thinking about whether there are new ways of funding shows, whether there are new ways of organizing ourselves, I know we'll talk about it a bit probably, but AI presents certain opportunities for how we improve what we do. And to try and be a leader, not me individually, but as a business, try and be a leader in the industry and in the market, in whatever shape that market becomes.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I hear that. And in terms of staff, one of the interesting things, of course, there can be loads of challenges with staff. Some people are lucky; they get loyal staff and very good staff and don't have much problems. Other people tearing their hair out trying to work out how to recruit the right people and how to retain. I just wondered what your experience of as a, being an employer, moving, as you said, from being somebody on your own to actually having to employ people. Is that been an easy process, or how have you found that?
I actually think it's been the most enjoyable part of growing the business. We set out right from the start to pay well and to treat people well. As I say, we have a written ethos in the company that talks about, and the first part of the ethos is we're not playing at this. We're building a business out of podcasts, and we don't apologize for wanting to make money. And because we make money, we pay people properly and we treat people properly. And I think we have probably paid slightly over the odds for the team that we've built. And I don't mean that in terms of their skill set, because I absolutely believe they're worth what we pay. We've paid over the industry rate. What that's meant is that we've been really picky about the people that we've brought on, and they are absolutely bloody wonderful. To every single one of them makes up a part of a team that is greater than its whole, and we all get on really well, and we've sort of nurtured a culture and been really transparent about things like pay. So if you have the same job title, you're paid the same. You have the same benefits. We have a bonus scheme that applies to everybody in the company. We have an openness about that. Whether the bonus scheme allows us to be completely open about where we stand as a business, how the year's going, where we are against targets, etc., so that everybody's clear. There are challenges, of course, around as a small business about not having an HR function and being able to try and create a strong culture and provide people with the security that they need and the ability to raise issues if they have issues. But just building a team who respect each other, who get on really well, who feel like we have a three-person leadership team, and they know that we sort of keep ourselves honest in terms of being open with the staff about the principles that we work by, and therefore being answerable to that. All of that has, as I say, actually been a joy. And yes, of course, there are challenges. There are challenges with any people, and trying to make sure that you can be sensitive to everybody's wishes and work patterns and situations when you are still trying to run a business. But frankly, I love my team, and it's yes, when you have other people's mortgages to pay, that gives you a pressure. But I love the people, and I love dealing with them. So yeah,
Comes across well. That's really sounds very strong and sincere. It's
thank
really
you.
interesting. It's really nice to hear because business. I was talking again when we was talking off air about having a platform where the genuine 96% of businesses are small.
Yeah.
And actually, the reputation for business being cutthroat, like The Apprentice, I'll step on your neck to win, actually, it gives business give business a bad name that we're all sort of cutthroat people who just want to make loads of money and screw people. But
Yeah, I hate The
actually,
Apprentice.
there's loads of businesses with great ethics, and as you said,
Yeah.
you're responsible for people's mortgages and that, and actually can be fantastic. Can have that fantastic values.
I think it's social. I hate The Apprentice. I hate the culture that it creates. I hate the fact that those people in the first episode are prompted to say, as you say, I would screw anybody over to get what I need and all of that. That is not the reality of what makes a great business. It's an incredibly short-sighted way to run a business, to pay people poorly, to treat them badly, to create a culture where they do think they've got to sort of, that is, that they've got to try and fight to survive. There are businesses in the media world, of course, who work like that, but they very quickly get found out. And we have barely lost anybody over the course of the last 5 years, and that's because they enjoy their job and because we treat people properly and we pay people well, and they just genuinely enjoy what they do. And so the idea that you would set up any sort of deliberate internal conflict, or you would see business as this sort of fight that you go into the office every day for, I find absolutely extraordinary to say. I hate the fact that The Apprentice, if you have people going into the workplace who think that the people on The Apprentice are their role models, then they're in the wrong place.
Really, really got the wrong idea.
Yeah,
absolutely. We mentioned earlier about just briefly about AI. How is that having any impact in your industry?
It is on the production side. I mean, yesterday slightly blew my mind in that, we had a presenter who said the wrong thing in a recording. They said start of 2025 instead of end of 2024, and instead of getting them to re-record it, we just made the AI we got the AI to make them say the right thing. Within 20 minutes, we'd fixed the edit so that the AI had sampled their voice, made them say the right thing, and it was indistinguishable from the rest of the audio. AI is also enabling us, simple things, or seemingly simple things like audio to text, means that we can record a program and then straight away have a transcript of it that we can use to edit. It opens up editing as a more accessible thing to do for lots of people, because they can use text editing as well as audio editing. So all of that is useful, and definitely speeds up what we do. I'm sure we haven't really scratched the surface of what it can do yet. It could be a threat in the sense that you can create podcasts these days with 2 AI hosts. If you use Notebook LM, which is a Google product, you can create a conversation between 2 robots and listen to it for 20 minutes, and they sound like human beings. Now, I genuinely hope that never becomes a mainstream thing, that people actually want to listen to a robot version of a presenter. I don't think anyone's scrambling for, nobody said that when Zoe Ball left Radio 2, she should be replaced by a robot speaking. And I don't think that's going to come anytime soon, but it's having that impact on what we do. But largely it's a helpful thing because it speeds up the process of editing. You can record a video podcast and then tell AI to choose your promotional clips, and it will do it in seconds. It's extraordinary. I say we're not there yet.
Yeah. So production side is major. Interesting. And lots of people do audiobooks. I mean, I'm a big audiobook fan, but I do like a physical book as well. Sometimes I do the audio and then think I've got to get the book, because there's certain referencing that is a bit more difficult on audio. You can pick up some stuff and use it as tips and stuff, and I teach it as well. But do you have any book recommendations?
Yeah, the book that really changed my I was reading at the time that Fresh Air really took off, but really inspired me. It's called Creativity Inc. And it's by a guy called Ed Catmull, who was one of the original founders of Pixar, along with Steve Jobs. And I know, Steve Jobs is always quoted and all of that, but Ed was there as Pixar decided to make the world's first fully computer animated movie, which is of course Toy Story, and built a culture around Pixar, which I think is difficult to beat in any cultural organization. I genuinely think that Pixar is one of the greatest cultural businesses of our lifetimes, and not just in the technology, because the technology is kind of neither here nor there these days. I mean, it used to be exciting to see a computer animated show, but when you think about films like Inside Out, or I forget I'll retake it because I've just remembered the film. When you think of shows like Inside Out or Coco, they're extraordinarily complex stories that, you know, most filmmakers wouldn't take on. And Ed was part of creating this culture that said we will tell complicated stories, and just because it's a cartoon, it doesn't need to be facile. And there's a brilliant story also about work culture. In Toy Story 2, there was a moment where someone sabotaged the studio, and they lost the whole of Toy Story 2. They lost all the characters, they lost all the code for what they were making. And there was one person who was actually on maternity leave who had a hard drive at home where Toy Story 2 was on. And they sort of, you know, just went and wrapped this thing in cotton wool and took it back and saved Toy Story 2. But they never did a witch hunt about who had tried to sabotage it. And they never, what they felt was it was much more important to save the project and move on and progress the company than to then have a witch hunt about who had, you know, sabotaged. And the subtitle to Creativity Inc. is overcoming the unseen forces that stand in the way of true inspiration. And Ed sees his role as being the person who gets all the junk out of the way so that creative people can be creative. And I think that idea of leadership, and I'm a former producer, as I say, and I barely make anything these days. But it means that I appreciate the role of producers and appreciate what they need. And allowing creative people to be creative and not worry about the stuff that you're worrying about, I think is such a core part of leadership. The other book that I would really recommend is called Go Luck Yourself. Go Luck Yourself, which is obviously a pun. But it's by a guy called Andy Nairn, who runs Lucky Generals, which is a brilliant, inspirational ad agency behind campaigns like Yorkshire Tea, which I think is just a phenomenal marketing campaign of the last 5 years. And Andy's all about taking luck, in inverted commas, and understanding what luck is, which is essentially opportunity plus the decision to do something about that opportunity. And he looks at various different scenarios of successful people who have been lucky, and say in inverted commas, but have essentially just capitalized on the opportunities that they've been given. So yeah, both Creativity Inc. and Go Luck Yourself, I think, are brilliant, non-preachy examples of books that can give you loads of ideas as a leader of how to, let's say, seize opportunities, motivate people, and build a business that you're proud of.
Yeah. No, fantastic. No, that's some couple of gems there. So two more to add to my list.
Yeah.
If you could start all over again, what would you do different?
I would be at least 15 years younger when I started. And I sort of, I'm nearly 50 now. And I don't mean that in a sort of, you know, God, we all wish we were younger. I think there's, you know, the majority of businesses are, you know, they're actually built, the majority of entrepreneurs are actually, you know, 40 plus, aren't they? But what I've seen is that because I started building a business at the point that I already had lots of responsibilities and, you know, outgoings and teenage kids and all of that, I wasn't able to take the risks or to make the sacrifices, I suppose, that it is often necessary to do at the early part of running a business. And I think that's been challenging. And there's nothing I can do about it. But I suppose what I mean is that if the opportunity had arisen for me to build a business earlier, then I think I would have preferred to do that. I can't change any of that. I think it goes back to what I said earlier, which is that I think I would have set up more of a support structure for myself as an individual and for the business than I did, and not try and push on quite so much with everything in my head, and try and distribute that knowledge a little better, and put in a few more safeguards within the business. But there's a hell of a lot I wouldn't change. And as I say, most of that's to do with the people that I've brought on who I love and who have made incredible decisions to come along and work alongside me. I think the only other thing I would do differently is that it's very easy in a modern business, particularly when you're employing young people, to sound patronizing about it for a second, to be almost too driven by ethics and that sounds bad, but I'll come back to why in a second. But there's a lot of virtue signaling within business, and it's one of the mistakes we made a couple of times, I think, was to turn work down because of some sort of ethical position. And that's noble in one sense, and it makes you feel good at the time. But actually, some of those jobs, when I look back now, would I have rather had the work at the early stage of building a business? Yes, I would. And I think I probably have been guilty of virtue signaling a couple of times on that side of things. And I would, I can't remember who wrote it. There was a brilliant article I saw on LinkedIn fairly recently about the fact that, once you've built a business and you're completely secure, then you can be more fussy about who your clients are and what sort of work you do. But actually, particularly when you're employing people, you have a responsibility. The most important ethical position is that you've taken people on and you have a responsibility to pay their mortgage. And I would defend that position now much more strongly than I think I did. I'm not saying, work for any old thing or ignore your own ethics and your own principles, but don't ignore the fact that, as I say, you have a responsibility to the people you employ to pay their wages, and that actually it's not an immoral position to put that first sometimes.
Mm-hmm. No, it's 100%. It's interesting. I remember many years ago, I've always remembered the quote where the Reverend Jesse Jackson said, "You need to be middle class to be morally, morally worthy." Because it's easy to say you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that when you've got a nice home and you're living nicely. But if you're starving and you're homeless and somebody steals an apple, it's you can take a very moral view of it. But if you look at it from another point of view, which moral is the moral? Is the moral that you prosecute the person for stealing the apple, or is it not moral that the society allowed that person to not have an apple? So it's kind of like, as you said, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Where is the moral line?
I think the business equivalent is really, yes, you have to judge when you're mature enough to take a principled moral position that you value more highly than making a profit for your employees. And I think that's there are moral positions we've taken that I'm proud of, and there are others that I think were probably virtue signaling and actually counterproductive to where we ended up.
Yeah, which is interesting. So if I gave you £100 million to
Hmm.
invest in business, what would you do with it?
um, there's a lot of examples in the podcast world of people having 100 million quid and throwing it away. Not to mention any names, Spotify, Harry and Meghan. But uh, so I think I'm in an industry actually where there have been where there has been big money thrown around. Spotify are a good example, and I love Spotify, but they would admit themselves that some of the decisions they made in the early days of podcasting did not work, and they made certain people very rich, but they didn't actually progress the business or the industry. I think what I would do at the moment is go back to what I was saying earlier of really exploring funding models. I think if I had the ability to to add people to this business who spend their whole time exploring different ways of making money in what is, I say, still quite an immature business, then that's how I would use that money. I think when I think about how other media is working, Mr. Beast is changing the way that TV works and the way that YouTube works. And that's because he's got an enormous amount of money that he's generated off his own back. But the visual medium is having huge sort of tentpole movements like that, and podcasting isn't yet really. And I've yet to see new ideas change the face of podcasting that are genuinely revolutionary. And so I think, if I had that money, what would I do? I would get big talent and big ideas to come together and create a whole new funding model for my industry and try and forge the way forward in that. Do you know whether 100 million would be enough would be a discussion, but let's start with that and see where we go. But I think that I would, rather than trying to build an empire, what I would do is try and change the industry that I'm in, really.
Brilliant. And yeah, just to finish off, what would you leave people who are listening to this, who are aspiring business owners or they're already business owners? What 2 or 3 tips would you leave, say, in business? What would you leave them with?
One of the things I think I've learned, and learned the hard way perhaps in the last couple of years, is that when that expansion comes and, you're dreaming, you're driving for the expansion, you're driving for bigger clients in particular. And we've started off, we've worked for some very small clients, but increasingly, you envisage that your expansion means working for bigger and bigger multinational clients. One thing I didn't fully appreciate is how slowly those people move. So there's a real mismatch between you as a small business needing to be agile, needing to move really quickly, needing to innovate, but your clients moving at a much, much slower pace and being much more vulnerable and much more sentient to macroeconomic factors. And so as you grow, the decisions that you are asking your clients to make take so much longer than they did when you were small. When we were a much smaller business, we could go from getting a sales inquiry on a Monday and signing a deal on the Friday and beginning production the following week. When you're working with a multinational business, that is completely different. Our sales cycles could be up to a year, 18 months or so. And I never fully appreciated the impact that would have. And I still catch myself. I still have moments where I expect a multinational organization to make a decision tomorrow and we could be producing next week. And I still wish that happened, but it doesn't. And so trying to build some sort of buffer that allows you to deal with that whilst growing, but appreciating that decisions won't be made tomorrow, and not getting too frustrated, but working in the knowledge that the groundwork you put in today will bring fruit in 18 months' time, but it might not happen till 18 months' time, and trying not to get frustrated with that and just appreciating that is part of your growth. And I think what you therefore have to have is enough of a sort of bread and butter work that allows you the time, means the business has still got money coming in whilst you're building those big clients who are going to take 18 months to make a decision. And when they come off, they'll be great. But it will take time, and you have to be patient with it. And I think that's one of the things that I've. So you have to hold your nerve in that sense. And I think the only other thing is, as I say, I've already talked about it. You build up so much important goodwill by treating people well, even competitors. I have competitors that I go for regular drinks with, that I'm on a WhatsApp group with, employees who you treat well and you are honest with, partners in leadership who, again, you are completely transparent with and who you respect. All of that builds up capital that you really need when it's hard. When you go through a tough time, and I've learned this a lot in the last couple of years, that when it's hard, you are able to cash in some of that goodwill that you've built. And it's so important, because if you've been an arsehole up to that point and things go badly, people will just watch you drown. And if you haven't been an arsehole and you've built up that capital that you can then cash in, it's incredibly valuable and incredibly sort of affirming, but also just it gets you out of a lot of holes. The people who say, I know you're having a hard time, do you want to go for a drink and just chat it through? I'm in the same boat. It gets you out of that feeling. When you're an entrepreneur, it can feel really lonely. But if you've treated people well and they see that you're having a tough time, they'll be there for you. Whereas if you have the apprentice mindset, as we've already talked about, they really won't. They'll just, you're on your own.
Oh, brilliant. Well, Neil, it's been fantastic. Lots of nuggets, a couple more books to add to my list of many books. And I just want to say thank you very much for taking the time to share these nuggets with us.
Enjoyed it. Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you.